everybody, welcome to Jacob's Quest, and tonight I just got back from watching The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Kind of a long title. Anyways, yeah, this is a prequel to the Hunger Games trilogy by like 60 years, and it's filling in the backstory of President Snow, who was the villain in that original, not a trilogy, sorry. There are 4 movies. They did the thing that they did back in the day where they split the last one in 2. So a quadrilogy, whatever you want to call it. There's 4 movies. Anyways, so yeah, I remember when this book was announced, and a lot of people were kind of questioning like what the point of it was, right? Yeah, having finally seen this movie, because I've never read that book, I gotta say, this is pretty fascinating stuff. So here's my thing. Although the Hunger Games franchise is of course under the umbrella of the YA thing that kind of took over pop culture for about a decade, right? Like you had your Twilight, and then you had your Hunger Games, and then you had your Maze Runners, and I don't even know the other ones. There were like a million that they tried to make franchises, and only a couple of them worked. But in any case, I always found that the Hunger Games franchise at the very least had more substance to it than your standard YA kind of nonsense. Like at the very least, it was more dark, kind of twisted when you really sat down and thought about like what exactly is happening here. And they always had like a lot of social commentary and kind of political commentary angles to it. And that part always much more fascinated me than like the whole, they tried to make it an Edward versus Jacob thing like the Twilight thing did. I don't care about that at all, right? Obviously that has its audience, but like the whole like, hey, by the way, there's this government that sends kids to die. What's up with that? Right? Like I've always had those questions. I'm like, well, hold on, tell me that story though. And I will say, this movie finally does at least address some of those things, like the Hunger Games specifically, and how they started off as much more of a not as technologically advanced, not as much of an entertainment spectacle kind of thing. They were on TV, but like the whole thing about being able to send them gifts and being able to donate to specific ones that you enjoy, and turning it more into like a reality game show type thing that we see in the later films. Like that's all stuff that slowly happened over time, and as we see in this movie, like a lot of this stuff starts getting introduced, and even then half of it doesn't work. Like their drones they send in to like, oh, you can send in your people drones, but then the drones malfunction, and so you're basically just sending in these exploding machines. So a lot of really cool ideas and things that I've always like, well, how did this even happen? Like in this, like if we're trying to like keep this in a grounded reality, how did this possibly happen? And we kind of see some of that. Now, having said that, I did leave this movie still thinking like, okay, but you can make another prequel. set it another 20-30 years before this one, because I want to see like how did America go from where we're at now to like this big war, and all the country gets divided into these like 12 different sections, and they each like have like their one thing that they produce, and like show me that story. Like honestly, that's what I'm much more fascinated with. So the Hunger Games themselves, it's cool and all, and it's pretty twisted, right? And they still do the thing where I think this is PG-13, so like they don't show a bunch of blood or anything like that. This isn't like the Thanksgiving slasher film I just saw. So people get stabbed, and you hear the stabbing sound, but they just kind of grab their stomachs like, oh, I just got stabbed, but we're not going to show a whole bunch of blood, so just like just acknowledge that I got stabbed and I'm dying. So they still do that. But yeah, following President Snow as a character, and we kind of see like being raised in the capital but not being like the richest person, and then He's being taught at this academy where now they have to become the mentors of the people participating in the games, and it just becomes this whole thing of like his relationship with, first it's just this girl who's chosen to be a member of the games, and they kind of develop this like relationship where first it's all just beneficial for him because he's trying to win this like cash prize basically, but then of course over time it transforms into something more than that, and then he gets in trouble because he technically cheated and helped her win, or helped her survive rather. And so this movie divides itself into like 3 separate sections. There's like right before the games, there's the games themselves, and then there's like a post-game section, which I think most people are gonna say is the section of the movie that maybe could have been its own thing, because admittedly, yes, like the before and during the games is where, you know, the original trilogy of movies, that's generally where they live. You know, like you get like a whole half movie before and then a whole half movie during the games, and that's kind of where it stops. But this movie does feel like it's a whole epilogue sequence of like, okay, but then he gets thrown in the military, and then he has to, you know, he's dealing with his friend who wants to be a good person but also is kind of stupid with it because he's doing things that are obviously gonna get caught. But it gets really complicated really fast, and admittedly some parts of this feel rushed because you're like, okay, so he recorded his friend, so he's betraying his friend, but also then he feels bad about betraying his friend, and then he was gonna leave to the capital, but now he can't leave to the capital because he might get arrested for killing this one person, and so now he agrees to run away with the girl. But then now the girl, you know, who he did all of this for, now he's real paranoid that she might end up telling someone because she's a loose end, and that'll ruin my chances to get back to the capital. And so now he kind of betrays her. They leave it real ambiguous if she was trying to just run away or if she was gonna tell someone, or, you know, it's this whole other plot that happens in the last, like, I would say 40 minutes of this movie. It's like a whole mini movie inside that, and it's a lot of like intersecting circles with new characters that we're introduced to. I would say they do their best to try and like set all of that up earlier in the movie. You know, like we see some of those characters when she's getting selected to the Hunger Games. But yeah, I will say the third act, it feels like an epilogue that's just really extended. I didn't mind it, but it feels kind of rushed also, so I'm almost wondering like maybe that could have just been a second movie. You know, maybe you could have split this one in half, because that is a lot of content that they just like put in here. But in any case, I do feel like we end this movie with like a full scope of this character. You know, like how does this guy go from, you know, I don't know if he was necessarily a good person, but he wasn't evil, to essentially by the end of the movie he's evil now. You know, he's fully on board with the government and the Hunger Games, and he's fully won over to that point of view because of all of this stuff that happens with this girl. And they even leave it on an ambiguous note, which I'll admit is kind of frustrating, because she's like running away, and then he's kind of starting to lose it because he got bit by a snake and he thought it was poisonous, but then it wasn't poisonous, and he sees her, and so he shoots, and we see her go down, but then he can't find her body, and we just see footprints, and so she's just gone, and he can't find her, and no one knows what happened to her, and the movie does not tell you, and it's kind of frustrating because you're like, well, after all of that, you're never gonna like tell us, like, did she die or not? Like, what happened? She's just gone. So I don't know. Obviously there's like windows open, like if they really wanted to. They don't have to, because I feel like the point really is that this President Snow kind of has this ghost with him forever, because he will never know what happened to this girl. You know, he doesn't know if she, you know, had gotten shot and she ended up bleeding out somewhere, or if she ran away. And you know, and now of course and this happened to me immediately, because I'm like, well, if she's alive and she's in District 12, and like 60 years later, like, what if she's this person's grandma? What if, what if she's related to this person? You know, immediately you start like throwing all these connections out there. So I don't know. Part of me is like, maybe they should have just said that she died or something, because now I'm sitting here endlessly gonna be like fixated on that, because that's what my Marvel Star Wars fandom brain does. You know, I have to like make these connections that don't exist. I just have to like invent them. In any case, yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. You know, they answered some questions about the Hunger Games, and it was kind of cool to see them in a much more, they're still in the future, so like their technology is still like advanced in a way, but also some of it looks a lot more analog, and so that they're like riding this very strange line. I don't quite know how to describe it, but like definitely some of their, you know, like, oh, they're really good at genetic research for some reason, and they can create these crazy creatures, and they can do all kinds of technologically advanced things, but then their computers all kind of look like they're from, you know, the 80s or even the 70s, you know, like older style computers, and they almost have like a BioShock type thing happening. I think that's the best way to describe it. It's everything's kind of like BioShock technology, you know, if you've ever played those video games. But in any case, yeah, I had a fun time. I do feel now compelled to go watch those movies again, because admittedly, when the movies came out, I read the books and I watched the movies, but after that, I haven't bothered ever since, and it's been like a decade now. It's been like a decade now. Anyways, you know, so I'm like, you know what, it's been enough time, I can check out the movies again. And I think with this prequel, I'll probably like put more strings together and be like, okay, we have some more context as to what was happening. But for me personally, I am still kind of wanting more information about like the war and the world and how the government ended up becoming this thing, you know. And I get it, you know, it's dystopian future, like the whole point is that like our reality could become this kind of thing. Like I understand that, but for like, I don't know, world building, just my nerdy brain just wants to know like the answers as to like, okay, but how did it happen in this world, you know? So in any case, yeah, I had a good time. There's political intrigue, there's a whole romantic thing, there's betrayal and lies and drama and all that stuff, and there's a bunch of kids killing each other. I mean, that's really what these movies are about, I guess. Yeah, let me know what you guys think. Are you gonna check out Hunger Games, Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes? Okay, there you go, I said it. Yeah, let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.